My parents turned my room into my brother's Livestream studio and kicked me out. 1 year later. My name is Ella Thompson. I'm 26 years old, a social media marketing consultant living in Nashville, Tennessee. Last summer, after a week-long trip to the Florida Keys, I came back home expecting to collapse into my own bed. But the moment I walked through that front door, I froze. My bedroom door now had a brand new deadbolt lock. Hanging above it was a glowing LED sign that read Livestream in progress, do not disturb. All my belongings had been shoved into our moldy garage out back. My dad didn't even look up from his morning coffee and newspaper. He just pointed toward the garage with his thumb and said, "Sleep there or find somewhere else to crash." I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, staring at the life I thought was mine, completely erased. So I packed what I could carry and walked out that door. 1 year later, my phone exploded with 47 missed calls from my mother and a single desperate text message. "Where are you? We need you now." What happened during that time? Why were they suddenly calling me after 12 months of silence? Stay with me, and I'll tell you everything. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, I was riding the highest wave of my career. My latest campaign for a major beauty brand had just wrapped, and I'd secured a contract worth $35,000. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe without checking my bank balance. Maybe even treat my parents to something special. I'd always dreamed of taking them somewhere tropical, just the three of us, to make up for all those years I'd been too buried in deadlines to spend quality time with them. So one evening, I sat them down at our kitchen table in our modest Nashville suburb and laid out my plan. "I'm booking us a trip to the Florida Keys," I said, grinning at my mom and dad. "Just us three. Flights, resort, snorkeling tours, everything's on me. What do you say?" My mom, Patricia, practically bounced in her chair, her eyes lighting up like Christmas morning. My dad, William, cracked one of his rare smiles and nodded approvingly. It felt incredible, like we were finally connecting as a family again after years of me being the workaholic who missed Sunday dinners. But then Mom's excitement dimmed, and she exchanged a loaded glance with Dad. "It would be wonderful if your brother could join us," she said carefully, her voice soft but insistent. My stomach dropped like a stone. My brother Jake was 29, a Twitch streamer who spent 14 hours a day screaming at video games for his audience of dedicated followers. He wasn't exactly broke, but he was always between opportunities, borrowing money from me that somehow never got repaid. $12,000 of it, to be exact. His girlfriend Brittany wasn't much better, constantly pushing him to chase bigger sponsorship deals while maxing out credit cards on designer clothes for her Instagram posts. I took a slow, deep breath, trying to keep my voice level. "Mom, I'm only covering you and Dad. Jake can handle his own expenses if he wants to come." The kitchen went dead silent. Dad's smile vanished completely, and he leaned forward with his elbows on the table, fixing me with that stern look I remembered from childhood. "That's pretty selfish, Ella," he said, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. "Your brother's working his tail off building his brand. You've got the money. Why can't you help family out?" But this was just the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. I stared at my father, feeling like I'd been slapped. "Help him out." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I'd been helping out for years. Covering their cable bill so Jake could have high-speed internet for streaming. Buying groceries when money got tight. I'd even bought Jake's entire gaming setup when he promised he'd pay me back within 6 months. That was 2 years ago. "Dad, he already owes me 12 grand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not running a charity here." Mom jumped in, her hands fidgeting with her coffee mug. "Ella, honey, family takes care of family. Jake's so close to making it big. You know how tough the streaming industry is. This could be his breakthrough year." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were treating me like I was being unreasonable, like my hard-earned money was just some kind of family ATM for Jake's pipe dreams. Brittany, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner scrolling through TikTok, finally spoke up. "You're doing really well, Ella," she said with that fake sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "A vacation for all of us would be such a generous gesture." A gesture. Like my money was just there for the taking. I clenched my fists under the table, watching Jake, who hadn't even bothered to look up from his phone during this entire conversation. That's when it really hit me. My parents weren't just asking me to pay for him. They expected it. Like it was my responsibility to fund Jake's lifestyle while they cheered him on from the sidelines. Jake's 29 years old, I said, looking directly at him. If he wants to go on vacation, he can figure out how to pay for it himself. Jake finally glanced up with that smirk I'd grown to hate. Relax, Ella. It's just a trip. Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird? I wanted to scream. Instead, I pushed my chair back and stood up. It is weird when I'm the only one expected to pay for everything around here. Dad slammed his palm on the table, making all the dishes rattle. Enough, he barked. If you're going to be stingy with your own family, maybe you shouldn't be planning trips at all. Stingy. That word hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Mom, desperately hoping she'd say something, anything to defend me. But she just stared down at her hands, staying completely silent. That night, I booked the Florida Keys trip for myself and my two best friends, Cameron and Blake. My parents were welcome to join if they paid their own way. But Jake and Brittany? Not a chance in hell. As I clicked confirm on those plane tickets, I felt this strange mix of relief and anger coursing through me. I thought that was the worst it would get. I had no idea how wrong I was. When I came back from that trip, I discovered just how far my family was willing to go to put Jake's needs above mine. And the betrayal I found waiting for me would change everything forever. I stepped off that plane from the Florida Keys feeling refreshed and recharged. The sun, the ocean, the laughter with Cameron and Blake, it had been exactly what I needed. The cab dropped me off at our house in Nashville, and I dragged my suitcase up the familiar driveway, already thinking about how good it would feel to sleep in my own bed. But something was off immediately. Jake's beat-up Honda Civic was parked in my usual spot, and Brittany's white BMW SUV was blocking half the driveway. I figured they were just visiting, maybe trying to smooth things over after our argument. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and called out, "I'm home," but got no response. The living room was eerily quiet, no sign of Mom or Dad anywhere. I headed down the hallway toward my bedroom, ready to drop my bags and finally relax. That's when I saw it. Where my simple silver doorknob used to be, there was now a heavy-duty deadbolt lock. Above my door, a professional-looking LED sign blinked "Livestream in progress" in bright blue letters. My heart started racing. I tried the handle, locked solid. My room, my sanctuary, was completely sealed off from me. I ran to the back of the house and burst through the door to our detached garage. Inside, under a layer of dust and cobwebs, was my entire life. My clothes were stuffed into trash bags. My laptop and camera equipment were stacked in a corner like garage sale rejects. My favorite leather jacket, the one I'd saved up for months to buy, was crumpled under a box of Jake's old streaming cables. My hands were shaking as I stood there, staring at the mess. This wasn't just about losing a room. This was my entire existence being swept aside to make room for Jake's ego. I stormed back into the house and found Brittany in the kitchen, casually sipping coffee like she owned the place. "Brittany, what the hell is going on?" I demanded. She looked up without a trace of surprise and set down her mug slowly. "Oh hey, Ella. Welcome back," she said with this infuriating casual tone. "Jake needed a professional setup for his streams. You know how important his career is right now. Your room was the only space with the right lighting and acoustics." I felt like I was losing my mind. "My room." My voice was getting louder. "You moved all my stuff to the garage without even asking me?" Brittany shrugged like she was discussing the weather. "We figured you wouldn't mind. You're always traveling for work anyway." Jake's home every day building his brand. Building his brand. I'd been living in this house my entire life, contributing to every bill, keeping this family afloat financially, while Jake played video games for strangers on the internet. "Where's Jake?" I asked through gritted teeth. Brittany pointed down the hall. "Recording." "You can't interrupt him, he's got a sponsored stream going until midnight." I marched back to what used to be my room and pounded on the door. Nothing. I could hear the faint sound of Jake's voice inside, probably trash-talking some 12-year-old kid in Call of Duty. He'd turned my personal space into his public stage, and nobody had bothered to mention it to me. I needed answers, and I needed them now. But when I found my parents and confronted them about this insanity, their response would shock me even more than finding my room taken over. Because this wasn't just about space, this was about who mattered in this family. and I was about to learn exactly where I ranked. I found my dad, William, in his recliner in the living room, casually watching ESPN like nothing had happened. Like his daughter's entire life hadn't just been packed away in garbage bags. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. He looked over with mild irritation, like I was interrupting something important. "What's this about, Ella?" I took a deep breath. Why is my room Jake's streaming studio? Why are all my belongings stuffed in the garage like trash? Before Dad could answer, Mom appeared from the kitchen, her face tense with that look she got when she was trying to avoid conflict. "Ella, please calm down," she said in that patronizing tone I'd heard 1,000 times. "Let's not make a scene. Calm down." I felt like my head was going to explode. My entire life has been shoved into a garage and you want me to stay quiet about it? Dad leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Your brother's career is taking off," he said coldly. "He's got major sponsors depending on him. You've got your job, Ella. You're never here anyway. You don't need that room as much as Jake does." I stared at him in disbelief. My job? My money? My contributions to keeping this household running? None of it mattered because Jake's streaming career took priority over everything. "Dad, I've been paying bills in this house for years," I said, my voice rising. "What about my life? What about my space?" Mom stepped closer, raising her hands like she was trying to calm down a wild animal. "Ella, we're a family," she said. "We make sacrifices for each other's success. Jake is so close to his big breakthrough." His big breakthrough. I'd heard that excuse every month for the past 3 years. It always ended the same way, with Jake blowing his opportunities and needing more money to invest in his future. That's when Brittany strutted into the room like she owned it. "You're making this way more dramatic than it needs to be," she said, crossing her arms. "Jake's under massive pressure right now. This studio setup could change everything for him." I turned to face her, my voice shaking with anger. "And what about me, Brittany? Where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" She had the audacity to shrug. "The garage is fine. It's just temporary until Jake establishes himself." Temporary. My childhood home had become temporary for me, while Jake got the royal treatment. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to say something, anything, to show that I mattered to him. Instead, he stood up, his face hard as stone. "You've got 2 choices, Ella," he said. "You can sleep in the garage, or you can find somewhere else to live." Those words hit me like a physical blow. My own father was choosing Jake over me, reducing my entire existence to an inconvenience he was willing to throw away. I looked at Mom, praying she'd step in, that she'd remember I was her daughter too. But she just stared at the floor, silent. Jake wasn't even there to witness this. He was probably in my room, streaming to his audience, completely oblivious to the family he was tearing apart. Something inside me snapped. Years of being second place, years of supporting everyone else while my own needs got ignored, years of watching Jake get everything handed to him while I worked myself to exhaustion. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad didn't even blink. "That's the deal." I felt this strange sense of clarity wash over me. I wasn't going to beg for a place in my own home anymore. I wasn't going to fight for people who had already decided I didn't matter. "Fine," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm done." I walked out of that living room with my head held high, my heart pounding but my mind crystal clear. They'd made their choice, and now I was making mine. But what I didn't know was that this decision would lead to the most difficult, yet most rewarding year of my life. I headed straight to the garage to grab what I could carry. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. My belongings looked like casualties of war, books with bent covers, clothes wrinkled beyond recognition, my art supplies scattered and mixed with Jake's old gaming junk. I found my largest duffel bag and started packing, my hands moving faster than my thoughts. As I stuffed my laptop, some clothes, and my most important documents into the bag, memories I'd been trying to suppress came flooding back. Jake had always been the golden child. When we were kids, he got the brand new Trek mountain bike for his birthday while I got a used scooter from a garage sale. In high school, Mom and Dad paid for his private football coaching, but my photography classes were too expensive. Even after I started working and contributing to household expenses, my money went to family bills while Jake's streaming income went straight into his gaming setup. I zipped up the bag, my chest tight with years of accumulated resentment. I thought about the time Jake borrowed $3,000 from my savings for a new computer, swearing he'd pay me back within a month. That was 18 months ago. Yet Mom always defended him, saying he was finding his path. Dad would nod proudly, talking about Jake's entrepreneurial spirit. I was the reliable one, the one who kept the lights on, but it was never enough. They'd chosen Jake over me again and again, and now they'd literally given him my room to prove it. I dragged the bag to my car, threw it in the back seat, and sat there for a moment in the driveway. The house was completely silent. No one came to check on me. No one even peeked out a window to see if I was okay. I pulled out my phone and texted Cameron, my best friend since college. "Can I crash at your place tonight? Long story." His reply came back in seconds, "Doors always open. Get over here." Driving through Nashville, I felt this weird mix of anger and relief. The streets were familiar, but the life I'd known was disappearing in my rearview mirror. Cameron's apartment was small and cluttered, nothing fancy, but it felt safer than my own home had in years. When I walked in, he was on his couch with a pizza box, watching Netflix. "You okay?" he asked, immediately sitting up, concern written all over his face. I dropped my bag and collapsed onto his couch. "They gave Jake my room," I said, my voice hollow. "Dad told me to sleep in the garage or get out." Cameron's eyes went wide, but he didn't interrupt. I told him everything, how Brittany acted like I was being dramatic, how Mom stayed silent, how Dad drew a line I couldn't cross. Saying it out loud made it real, and the betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Cameron leaned forward. "That's completely insane, Ella," he said. "You don't deserve any of that." His words were simple, but they hit hard. For the first time all day, I felt truly seen. I didn't have to explain why I was hurt or justify my anger. Cameron understood immediately. He offered me his spare room, basically a closet with an air mattress, but it was more respect than my own family had shown me. As I lay on that air mattress that night, staring at the ceiling, something became crystal clear. Leaving wasn't just about escaping the garage or Jake's takeover of my space. It was about breaking free from 26 years of being overlooked, of carrying people who didn't value me. I wasn't running away from anything. I was running towards something better. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. And that decision was about to change everything. The next morning, I woke up on Cameron's air mattress feeling something I hadn't experienced in years, hope. Cameron didn't just offer me a place to crash, he became my partner in building a completely new life. Over breakfast of leftover pizza and coffee, he didn't waste time with sympathy. Instead, he pulled out his laptop. "You need your own place," he said matter-of-factly. "Let's make it happen." By noon, we'd called Blake, my other best friend who knew Nashville's rental market inside and out. The three of us spent the afternoon touring apartments, narrowing down options that fit my budget. We found a one-bedroom downtown with huge windows and exposed brick walls. Rent was $1,400 a month, but it felt like a palace compared to that garage. Blake drove me to sign the lease the next day, cracking jokes to keep my spirits up. "This place has way better Wi-Fi than your parents' house," he said, grinning as we walked through my new front door. "And no annoying streamers." I laughed for the first time in days, feeling this incredible lightness in my chest. Moving in took a weekend. Cameron hauled boxes, Blake set up my internet and helped me arrange furniture, and I slowly unpacked the pieces of my life I'd managed to save. Every step felt like reclaiming who I was supposed to be. With my own space, I threw myself into work like never before. As a social media consultant, I'd always juggled multiple clients, but living with my family had been constant chaos. Jake's late-night streaming sessions, Mom's endless drama about his career, Dad's demands for help with bills, it had been impossible to focus. Now, in my quiet apartment, I could actually think. I pitched campaign ideas I'd been developing for months, reached out to brands I'd only dreamed of working with, and started a YouTube series about entrepreneurship and finding your own path. The creative freedom was intoxicating. Within 6 weeks, my income had tripled. One major fashion brand offered me a year-long contract worth $75,000, more than enough to cover rent, save for the future, and finally build the life I wanted. Cameron and Blake were my biggest cheerleaders, dropping by with takeout to celebrate every milestone. "You're absolutely crushing it," Cameron said one night, raising a glass of wine. Blake chimed in, "Told you that house was holding you back." Their support reminded me what real family looked like, people who lifted you up instead of dragging you down. I built a routine that actually worked. Mornings for content creation, afternoons for client strategy calls, evenings for networking and building my personal brand. I joined a co-working space downtown and connected with other entrepreneurs who shared resources and ideas. My YouTube channel started gaining serious traction, with tens of thousands of views on videos about independence and self-worth. Viewers left comments about how my story inspired them to leave toxic situations. It felt incredible to know my work mattered, that I was building something meaningful without my family's dysfunction clouding everything. There were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, I'd wonder if I'd been too harsh, if I should reach out and try to repair things. But then I'd remember the garage, the way Dad dismissed me, how Jake never even acknowledged what he'd done. I'd made the right choice. My phone stayed completely silent. No calls, no texts from Mom, Dad, Jake, or Brittany. That silence was both painful and liberating. It confirmed they didn't care enough to reach out, but it also meant I was free to build my future without their constant drama. By the end of my first year on my own, I'd saved enough to buy a car, furnish my apartment properly, and even start an emergency fund. I wasn't rich, but I was stable and independent, something I'd never achieved while supporting my family. Cameron and Blake kept me grounded through it all, always ready with encouragement when I needed it. They didn't just help me find a place to live, they helped me find out who I really was when I wasn't carrying everyone else's problems. But just when I thought I'd left that chapter of my life behind forever, my phone would ring with a call that would test everything I'd built. Because my family's problems had finally caught up with them, and they thought they knew exactly who to call for help. Almost exactly 1 year after I'd walked out, my phone lit up with a notification that made my blood run cold. It was a text from Brittany, the first contact from anyone in my family since I'd left. "Ella, we need to talk. It's urgent." My stomach twisted, but I ignored it. I was in the middle of a presentation for a major client, and I'd learned not to let my family's drama interrupt my professional life. But then another text came. And another. By 6 p.m., my phone showed 47 missed calls from Mom and a voicemail that sounded absolutely desperate. Something major had happened. I called Cameron immediately. "You're not going to believe this," I said, explaining the barrage of messages. He suggested we meet at our favorite coffee shop to figure out what was going on, and he'd bring Blake for moral support. When I got there, both my friends were already waiting, ready to help me navigate whatever crisis my family had created now. I played Mom's voicemail on speaker. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable from the confident woman I'd known growing up. "Ella, please call me back. We're in serious trouble. Jake needs you. Jake needs you." After everything, they were reaching out because of Jake. Again. I called Mom back, steeling myself for whatever was coming. She answered before the first ring finished. "Ella, thank God," she said, her voice frantic. "Jake's in massive trouble. He lost his biggest sponsorship deal." I stayed silent, waiting for the real story. She continued, explaining how Jake had been gambling online, sports betting, poker, cryptocurrency trading. He'd blown through tens of thousands of dollars he didn't have, money he'd borrowed against future sponsorship deals that never materialized. When his sponsors found out about the gambling, they dropped him immediately. "We had to sell the house," Mom said, her voice breaking completely. I gripped the phone tighter. The house, my childhood home, the one I'd helped pay for with years of contributions, was gone because of Jake's reckless behavior. I felt a stab of loss, but no surprise. This was exactly who Jake was, chasing get-rich-quick schemes, never thinking about consequences. "What do you want from me?" I asked, keeping my voice completely flat. Mom hesitated, then said the words I knew were coming. "We need your help, Ella. Money, maybe a place to stay until we get back on our feet." I almost laughed out loud. After they'd kicked me out, stolen my room, and ignored me for a full year, they thought I'd swoop in to save them. Before I could respond, I heard Brittany's voice in the background. She'd been listening on speaker. "Ella, please," she said, her usual smugness completely gone. "Jake's falling apart. We're family. You're doing so well now. Can't you help us out?" There was that word again, family. They hadn't treated me like family when they gave Jake my room. They hadn't acted like family when Dad told me to live in a garage. Now, with their world collapsing, they suddenly remembered I existed. I took a deep breath, looking at Cameron and Blake across the table. Their faces showed a mix of shock and pride. They knew what I was about to say. "Brittany," I said, my voice steady and firm, "you don't get to call me family now. You made your choices. Jake made his. I'm not cleaning up this mess." There was a long pause. Mom started to speak, her voice trembling, but I cut her off. "I spent years supporting this family while you put Jake first every single time. I'm done. I built my own life, and I'm not throwing it away to fix problems I didn't create." I hung up, my hand shaking slightly, but my resolve absolutely solid. Cameron leaned back in his chair. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. Blake nodded. "They chose their path a long time ago. You don't owe them anything." Later that week, I heard through a mutual friend that Jake's gambling debts were close to $80,000. My parents had sold the house to cover part of it, but they were still drowning. Jake hadn't streamed in months, his career completely destroyed. Brittany was working at a retail store, their social media lifestyle in ruins. I felt a brief flicker of pity, but it faded quickly. They'd built this disaster, not me. Leaving my family wasn't just about escaping their chaos, it was about discovering what I was truly capable of when I put myself first. I learned that real strength isn't about enduring toxic situations, it's about having the courage to walk away and build something better. Cameron and Blake showed me what genuine support looks like. When I was at my lowest point, they didn't just offer help, they believed in me. They showed up with practical solutions and emotional strength, proving that chosen family can mean more than blood relations. This journey taught me that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, and that's okay. Walking away from my family was the hardest decision I ever made, but it was also the most important. Now my life is completely my own. My business is thriving, my apartment feels like home, and I'm surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I've learned to prioritize my peace and invest in relationships that lift me up. If you're facing a similar struggle, know this, you're stronger than you think. You don't have to stay in a place that diminishes you just because it's familiar. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to let them face the consequences of their choices while you build the life you deserve. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself over toxic family dynamics? Share your story in the comments below. You might just inspire someone else to find their strength.